Welcome back, it's Seth here. We have a real serious problem right now, and that is that more individuals are getting poorer and poorer as time is progressing. Every single year that's going by, more and more people are falling into poverty.
Card Food Banks Canada has given this country a D. It highlights recent data from Statistics Canada that shows a 40% increase in poverty and food insecurity in the last 2 years, with a quarter of all households in Canada struggling to afford food.
And you know it's bad when the food banks can't even meet the current demand. There are several reasons why more people are falling into poverty, and these trends are only getting worse year over year. In this video, I'll be discussing these reasons and trends. However, before I dive deeper into this video, please hit the like button down below, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to help our channel. Now that you hit the like button, let's dive in. So diving in, the first reason why poverty is growing in Canada is because the cost of living is increasing drastically versus our wages. As the years go by, the cost of living is increasing drastically. However, our wages aren't. So the actual wages that we're making are actually not the living wages that we need to live a comfortable life. So to give you perspective, the current minimum wage in Ontario is $17.60. However, the living wage, which gives an individual the ability to live a comfortable life, is actually $27.20. At $27.20, this gives an individual who lives in Ontario the opportunity to afford food, housing, childcare, and transportation. But the minimum wage is only $17.60, meaning there's a shortfall of $9.60, and this means that an average individual in Ontario will struggle to afford the basic necessities to live a comfortable life. This isn't just an Ontario issue, this is a Canada-wide issue. So for comparison, you see that in Newfoundland and Labrador, the minimum wage is $16. However, the living wages required are $25.31. Meaning there's a difference of $9.31. So people are struggling to afford a basic life in Newfoundland and Labrador. Then when you look at Nova Scotia, their minimum wage is $15.60. However, the living wage that they require is $27.60. So there's a difference of $11.90. And in PEI, the minimum wage is $16. And the living wage required there is $22.71. So there's a difference of $6.77. This income disparity is visible in all provinces, and the gap is only getting bigger and bigger as years progress. The largest area where this difference is causing an average individual to struggle is in housing. More than ever, this income disparity is causing a huge issue on individuals to afford housing, as housing is the wealth gate and it's becoming locked. Housing has become the second reason why more people are ending up in poverty. Housing has become a huge issue in Canada in the past decade or so, as more and more young Canadians are struggling to have the ability to purchase their own place. It's gotten so bad that the first-time home buyers are older than they ever been before. The average age of a first-time home buyer in Vancouver is 46 years old. The average age of a first-time home buyer in Toronto is 40 years old, and in Montreal, they're 39 years old. So to give you a bigger picture, the median after-tax income in 1994 was $32,000, and the average price of a home in Canada was $160,000, meaning you're spending 5 times the median after-tax income on housing. Now, if we look at the map of Canada in 1994 and a city like Toronto, the median after-tax income in Toronto in 1994 was $39,000. The average price of a home was $196,000, which means your housing would cost you around 5 times your median after-tax income. In Ottawa, the median after-tax income was $35,000, and the average price of a home was $114,000. So purchasing a home was 3.2 times your median after-tax income. And in Vancouver, the median after-tax income was $36,000, and the average cost of a home was $289,000, which meant purchasing a home would be 8 times your median after-tax income. Now let's fast forward to 2024. In 2024, the median after-tax income in Canada is $82,000, and the average price of a home is $690,000, which means your housing is going to cost you 8.4 times your median after-tax income. Now, if we look at the major cities in Canada in 2024, in Toronto, the median after-tax income is around $96,000, and the average price of a home is $1,156,000. This means housing is going to cost you 12 times your median after-tax income, where in 1994, it was only 5 times the amount. In Ottawa, things look a little better, where the median after-tax income is around $94,000, and the average price of a home is just a bit over $408,000. This means housing is going to cost you 4.3 times your median after-tax income, so only a slight increase from 1994. However, if we look at Vancouver, things have really got out of hand. In Vancouver, the median after-tax income is around $90,000, and the average price of a home is $1.3 million. Housing is going to cost you 14.4 times your median after-tax income. And if you remember from 1994, it would only cost you 8 times your income. So it's more than clear that wages have not kept up with the increased cost of housing. And what this is causing is that more young Canadians are living with their parents for a longer period of time. Homes are now turning into multi-generational homes where different generations are living under the same roof. And those individuals that do want to move up, they're renting longer than ever before. So home ownership is actually becoming one of the biggest differences for individuals who are on their path to becoming poor or on their path to becoming wealthy. If you own a home, you're going to be looked upon as being much wealthier than someone who doesn't. Now, moving on to another reason that's leading more people into poverty, and that is debt, which is turning into the silent tax on the poor. Debt is a continuous problem which is only getting worse year over year. Canada's household debt has reached over $3 trillion. And by the second quarter of 2025, the debt to income ratio is sitting at 174.9, which means that the average Canadian owes $1.75 for every dollar of disposable income that they have. Canada holds the highest level of household debt in the G7. Like we just said, Canadian household debt to disposable income is approaching 180%. But when you compare to other G7 countries, only Germany and the US come close, and they're at 100%. So if you're wondering what type of debt does an average Canadian hold, well, the largest debt for an average Canadian is actually their mortgage, which sits over $359,000. Then the average Canadian also has student loans, which is over $20,000. Then car loans of over $22,000, and some personal loans, which are close to $14,000. So this means on average, a Canadian household holds over $416,000 in debt. That's a lot of debt, and it will take several years for individuals to pay back all this debt. However, what's alarming is this is just the average. There are a lot of individuals out there that have more debt than $416,000. This unfortunately means that these individuals will be paying back all this debt for pretty much their whole life. So the more debt the Canadians take on, the poorer they're becoming compared to the rest of the world. Now, moving on to the next reason why more Canadians are being pushed into poverty, and that is because the rich own the assets. I've touched on this before in another video. However, this is a growing concern that rich own majority of the assets in Canada. This only consists of few families or individuals that have access to a large amount of assets. And these assets are only going up in value year over year, so making the gap between the rich and the poor even larger. Wealth in Canada is heavily concentrated at the top 10% of individuals. These top 10% of individuals own over 47.9% of the wealth in Canada, where the bottom half only owns 5.5%. This disparity is the worst in BC, where the top 10% of the population owns 56.2% of the wealth, and the bottom half only has 3.1% of the wealth. This difference is alarming, and it's only getting worse year over year. And if you're wondering what is making the rich richer every single year, and that is that the rich are focused on buying as much assets as possible. So for comparison, if you look at the middle class, most of the middle class's net worth is tied up in their primary residence, and some of their assets are in the pension accounts and other liquid assets. But if we compare this to the rich, they're the complete opposite. For the rich, their primary residence actually only makes up a small percentage of their net worth. Most of their net worth is actually coming from stocks, securities, mutual funds, trusts, business equities, and investment properties. Acquiring assets is the biggest difference between the rich and the poor. And the rich are getting richer year over year as their assets are going up in value, and they keep acquiring more. Over time, the bottom half is going to have a much harder time to move up in social classes, as the rich are on their way to controlling most of the assets in Canada. Now, another factor that's pushing more and more individuals in Canada into poverty is the lack of financial literacy. When I was in high school, they had recently implemented some financial literacy. This was a couple weeks in math class where we learned how to calculate a return on investments. And we didn't learn anything else. Sure, learning how to calculate a return on your investments, great, but no one even teaches you how to invest, where one should invest, What do I even look to invest in? In reality, there is so much more to financial literacy than to just understand how to calculate the return on your investment. And actually, I would argue that financial literacy is almost never ending. No one in school teaches you about taxes, and taxes is a huge part of your life in Canada. As there's federal taxes, provincial taxes, sales taxes, we just had carbon taxes, you have land transfer taxes, and then you have property taxes, and you have so many other taxes that I can't even keep track of anymore. Also, no one in school teaches you how to manage money, and I think that's one of the most important principles of financial literacy. When you're graduating high school, it sounds normal to get debt to go to post-secondary, something like university or college. Then once you're done university or college, it's more than normal to get debt to buy your own car because at this point you want some independence. Then once you start your career, you're probably going to want to buy your own house and get married. So now you're going to go into more debt. This is all so normalized in society today. The system is pretty much created so that you end up in poverty, unless you're doing your own research and becoming financially literate. And you can do that by reading books and articles, watching YouTube videos on financial literacy, and then applying what you're learning in your life. If Canadians don't do the work to become financially literate, more and more Canadians will end up becoming poor. So all this level of debt and the lack of financial literacy, more and more Canadians are ending up in poverty because of lifestyle inflation due to social pressure. This is the final reason, and I think the nail in the coffin, which pretty much ensures that once you hit lifestyle inflation and you keep the trends, you're never gonna get out of poverty. Lifestyle inflation actually starts at a very young age. I remember in high school, I was saving up money to buy a BlackBerry. And at that time, I thought a BlackBerry was the coolest phone out there because you can message your friends on BBM. That was the biggest, hottest thing back then. So all the money I saved up, I went out and bought a BlackBerry. However, a couple years later, guess what? The BlackBerry is not in anymore. It's the iPhone. And now everyone's buying an iPhone. And if you don't buy an iPhone, well, you're not a cool kid in school anymore. So what did I do? All the other money I was saving up, now I spent it on a new iPhone so I could fit in and not feel the social pressure. The thing is, the iPhone's not a bad phone. It's actually pretty cool. However, the pressure to keep up with everyone, that is. And this pressure over time only gets worse and worse for a lot of individuals. So what happens with most individuals is that when they get a new job, now they think they need to go buy a brand new car. Or when someone gets a raise, they now think that they need a bigger apartment. And some people, when they also get that raise, they also want to go on lavish vacations because they've worked hard for it. And most importantly, when they go on these lavish vacations, they have to make sure that they post it all over social media. But here's the reality. That new car that they purchased, that's entirely financed because they don't have the money to actually buy it. And that bigger apartment that they just got, well, it's taking a bigger chunk out of their paycheck than their old apartment. And all those lavish vacations, well, they're being paid by that credit card, which has a running outstanding balance. So it becomes really important over time that you know what these triggers are for you and you don't get caught up with lifestyle inflation. It is more than okay to drive an older car. It is more than okay to live in a smaller apartment. And it's more than okay to not go on lavish vacations, especially if it's going to end up making you more poor than before. So my final thoughts on more and more Canadians becoming poor is that we cannot control the economy. We have no idea where the economy is headed tomorrow, if it's headed towards a recession or huge expansion. However, we should control what we can. So that means that we should focus on building several streams of income in case if one goes, we have income coming through others. And in general, we're focused on creating higher income. The second thing that I'll focus on is paying off debt as soon as possible, especially bad debt such as credit card debt and your car loan. Those debts are not helping you grow your net worth in the long run at all. And once you have your debt under control, I would focus on buying as much assets as possible, such as stocks, ETFs, mutual funds, or an investment property if you like real estate. Or even you could start a business that you've always wanted to start. By investing and acquiring assets, that's how real wealth is created. And it's created over time. There is no such thing that will make you rich overnight. So by doing this, you're giving yourself the best chance of not going into poverty and actually becoming wealthy. And your kids will thank you for it. I really do hope you guys enjoy this video and you guys take something away from this. If you guys enjoy this video, please stay tuned for future videos. And until next time, remember to keep investing.